Today, Jamaica turns 64. Independence, the 6th of August, 1962. A flag went up, a flag came down, and a country that had been somebody's property for 468 years stopped being it. But some things on this island are older than the country. There are surnames here that were already being written into ledgers before there was an England in Jamaica at all. Names that survived the Spanish, survived the invasion, survived slavery, survived apprenticeship, survived Morant Bay, and are still being called across yards in St. Elizabeth this morning. 20 of them, counting backwards through time. And number 1 predates every single other name on this island. Now, somebody is going to say it, and they should, so let's take it head on. These are slave masters' names. Why would we celebrate that? We're not. Not one man on this list is being honored here. Most of them were monsters, and the record says so plainly. But here is what actually happened. Those families came here to take a fortune and leave. Nearly all of them did leave. Back to England, back to Scotland, to townhouses in London bought with Jamaican sugar. Their names died out in the places they came from and in the places they went. And the names stayed here, carried today, overwhelmingly, by the descendants of the people they owned. That is not their legacy. It's ours. They lost the island. We kept the paperwork. On Independence Day, that's worth 20 minutes. Here's how you actually date a Jamaican surname. There are 3 archives, and they stack. The 1817 slave registers, every enslaved person on the island by name, age, estate, and parish, updated every 3 years by law. That's the one this channel usually works from. Behind that, the land patents. The grants issued from 1655 onward, when the English took the island from Spain and began carving it into estates. Every grant has a name and a date on it, and behind even that, the Spanish-era records, thinner, harder, mostly church and trade documents from before 1655. Put them in order, and you get something most people have never seen. A rough timeline of when each surname arrives in Jamaica and stays. Some of these names have been here for 100 years longer than the United States has existed. Some arrived before the first enslaved African was landed at Kingston. One of them was already here when the English fleet appeared on the horizon. 20. Newest to oldest. Stay for the top 3. Number 2 founded an estate in 1670 that is still cutting cane today. One of the oldest continuously working properties in this hemisphere. You can drive past it. And number 1 is a name that was on this island before the English were, carried by people who came here running from something worse, and whose descendants founded the newspaper Jamaicans still read every morning. Before we start, comment your surname and tell me how far back your family can actually name people. 2 generations? 4? 6? Somebody's going to say, we go back to 9 Mile, and that's all I know. See, say it anyway. That's the point of this comment section. And if your name is on this list, you're carrying something that has been on this island longer than the Jamaican flag has existed. Happy Independence Day. 20 down to 1. 20. Robertson is Highland Scottish. Clan Donachide, out of Perthshire, descended from the Earls of Atholl. It arrives in Jamaica with the great Scottish influx of the 18th century. By the late 1700s, roughly a third of white men on the island were estimated to be Scots. Overseers, bookkeepers, attorneys, small planters. In Jamaica, it settles heavily in Portland and along the northeast, where the estates were smaller and the mountains steeper. Newest of the old. But 300 years is still 300 years. 19. MacLeod comes from Skye and Lewis in the Hebrides, and the name itself is Norse, from Ljótur, Viking, then Gaelic, then Jamaican. It lands in Clarendon and the Central Plain, on the largest estates on the island. A name that crossed from Norway to Scotland, then Scotland to Jamaica, and is now more likely to be answered to in Kingston than in Stornoway. 18. MacFarlane is from the shores of Loch Lomond, a clan so notorious for cattle raiding that the full moon was called MacFarlane's Lantern. In Jamaica, it spreads through the central and western parishes. Same century, same mechanism as the last two. Scotland exported its landless younger sons to the Caribbean, and the Caribbean kept their names. 17. Anderson means son of Andrew, the patron saint of Scotland. It arrives in the 1700s and spreads unusually wide, showing up in almost every parish. A commenter gave me Anderson out of St. Mary on the north coast. St. Mary's registers lean toward the Bight of Biafra, the Niger Delta, Igbo territory, the ports at Bonny and Old Calabar, with a strong Gold Coast layer underneath. And St. Mary is where Jamaica's largest 18th century uprising began. Easter 1760, on Frontier and Trinity estates, led by a Fante man the records call Tacky. 16. Walker is English and occupational, but not the obvious one. A walker was someone who trod woolen cloth in water to thicken it. Filthy, cold, essential work. It's one of the earliest ordinary English surnames to appear in Jamaica, showing up in 17th century records among settlers rather than dynasties. Somebody commented Walker out of St. Mary as well. The great houses on this list all fell. The names of working men like this one are the ones that actually spread. 15. Nelson is son of Neil. Gaelic in root, English in form. In Jamaica, it concentrates around St. Elizabeth, particularly the Newmarket district, which a commenter named directly. St. Elizabeth's estates bought through the Gold Coast forts more consistently than almost anywhere in the Caribbean. Ashanti and Fante country, modern Ghana. And on the northern edge of that parish is Accompong, the maroon town that forced a British treaty in 1739, still standing, still marking that treaty every January the 6th. 14. Dixon is son of Dick, Northern English from the border counties. It appears in Jamaican records in the 17th century, which puts it a full century ahead of the Scottish names we opened with. Border families were overrepresented in early Caribbean settlement for a specific reason. After the Union of the Crowns in 1603, the English and Scottish crowns pacified the border region hard, and a lot of those families left rather than be pacified. They didn't get less dangerous, they just moved. 13. White is one of the oldest surnames in the English language, a description before it was a name, and it appears in English records before surnames were even hereditary. In Jamaica, it turns up almost immediately after 1655, and it's still everywhere. A commenter gave me White out of Manchester. Manchester is the youngest parish on the island. Created in 1814, 3 years before the registers began. So, a White family there is a very old name on very new ground, which usually means they arrived from Clarendon or St. Elizabeth when the parish was carved out. 12. Blake has two completely separate origins, and both landed here. The English one is from Blek, dark. The Irish one is from the tribes of Galway, one of the 14 merchant families that ran that city for 400 years. Both appear in Jamaica in the 17th century, which makes Blake one of the earliest names on this list that ordinary Jamaicans carry in large numbers today. The Irish presence in Jamaica is real and much less talked about than the Scottish one. Some arrived as indentured labor, some as overseers, some as planters, and Cromwell shipped Irish prisoners here in the 1650s. 11. Manning is English, from a personal name meaning man. And in Jamaica, it left something you can walk into. In 1738, a Westmoreland planter named Thomas Manning died and left his estate to found a free school. Manning's School in Savannah-Lamar opened on that bequest and is still operating. One of the oldest schools in the entire Western Hemisphere. Older than every university in the United States, except 3. Westmoreland's registers point overwhelmingly to the Gold Coast, and Westmoreland is where the 1760 Rising burned longest and hardest. A school built by sugar money, in the parish that came closest to ending sugar. 10. Dawkins. Dawkins is a diminutive of David, and in Jamaica it belongs to one of the earliest planter dynasties on the island. The Dawkins family were established in Clarendon and St. Elizabeth from the late 17th century, held enormous acreage, and stayed for generations, long enough that the name embedded itself in the population of the whole southern belt. That's the pattern with the dynasties. The longer a family held one piece of land, the more thoroughly its name spread through the people who worked it. Their permanence is exactly why the name outlived them. 9. Tharp. Tharp is a Yorkshire name, from Thorpe, a hamlet. John Tharp built Good Hope in Trelawney in the 18th century, and at his death in 1804, he was, by most accounts, the largest single slaveholder in Jamaica. Around 3,000 people across a dozen properties. Good Hope is still standing. You can visit it. Trelawney's estates bought Coromantee, Gold Coast, Akan, in some of the highest concentrations recorded anywhere in the Americas. The parish borders the cockpit country, where the Maroons fought 2 wars and were never conquered, only deported. 1 man, 3,000 names. That's how a surname this specific to one Yorkshire hamlet ends up as a common Jamaican name. And that's still only the 18th century. The next 8 names were already here before any of that started. 8. Modyford. Now we go back to the beginning. Sir Thomas Modyford was governor of Jamaica from 1664. He came from Barbados, and he brought the thing that changed everything: the sugar model. Large estates, mass importation, industrial scale. Before Modyford, Jamaica was a poor English outpost full of privateers. After Modyford, it was the most valuable colony in the empire. He is also the man who licensed Henry Morgan to raid Panama. The name is rare in Jamaica today, and that rarity is itself the story. It means the family left, and it means the few who carry it can trace a very short line back to the 17th century. 7. Long Samuel Long came to Jamaica as part of the 1655 invasion force. He stayed, took land, became Speaker of the Assembly and Chief Justice, and founded a family that held property here for 200 years. His descendant Edward Long wrote The History of Jamaica in 1774, one of the most detailed accounts of the island in that era, and one of the most viciously racist books ever published in English. Historians still use it, carefully, because it records things nothing else does. That's the honest position on a document like that. It is evidence, written by a man who despised the people he was describing. Both facts have to be held at once. 6. Rose Fulk. Rose was among the earliest English patentees in Jamaica, arriving in the 1660s, a physician who acquired substantial land in the first wave of grants. A commenter gave me Rose out of St. Elizabeth Newmarket District, alongside Hall, Heron, and Nelson. That's a tight cluster, and clusters like that almost always mean one property. Rose is one of the oldest continuously present English surnames on the island. 360 years, unbroken. 5. Barrett. The Barretts arrived with the 1655 expedition and held Cinnamon Hill in Trelawney for generations. And this family produced something nobody expected. Elizabeth Barrett Browning, one of the most celebrated English poets of the 19th century, was descended from these Jamaican planters. Her family's wealth came directly from enslaved labor on this island. She knew it, wrote about it with open shame, and published The Runaway Slave at Pilgrim's Point in 1848, one of the fiercest anti-slavery poems in the language. The money that paid for her education came out of Trelawney. So did the guilt that shaped her work. The Barrett name is still carried by Jamaicans in that parish today. 4. Beckford. Peter Beckford came to Jamaica in the 1660s and became lieutenant governor. His family became the wealthiest in the colony and among the wealthiest in England. His grandson, William Beckford, was twice Lord Mayor of London, the single richest man in Britain, funded entirely by Jamaican sugar and Jamaican people. There is a statue of him in the Guildhall in London, and the plaque beside it now says what the money was. Beckford is a common Jamaican surname today. It is a vanishingly rare English one. Read those two sentences together, and you understand this entire video. 3. Ellis. The Ellis family took land in the 1660s and held it continuously into the 20th century. One of the longest unbroken landholdings on the island, across Clarendon and St. Thomas. 3 centuries on the same ground. And that is precisely why Ellis is a common surname among Black Jamaicans in those parishes today. Continuity of ownership meant continuity of population. The people didn't move because the property never changed hands. The family is gone. The name stayed exactly where they put it. 2. Price. Francis Price was a soldier. He came ashore with the English invasion force in 1655. Not a lord, not an investor. A man with a musket. And when the fighting stopped, he took a land grant in the hills of St. Catherine. In 1670, he founded an estate and called it Worthy Park. Worthy Park is still there. It is still cutting cane. It has been in continuous agricultural operation for 355 years, which makes it one of the oldest continuously working estates anywhere in the Western Hemisphere. Its records are among the most complete in Jamaica. Historians have used Worthy Park's books to reconstruct the demography of slavery in detail that isn't possible almost anywhere else. Which means, if your family is Price out of St. Catherine, there is a realistic chance that your ancestors are named, individually, in surviving 18th century ledgers. Not estimated. 1. LINDO and Number 1, a name that was on this island before the English were. LINDO, and with it, Henriquez, da Costa, de Cordova, Delgado. These are Sephardic names, Spanish and Portuguese Jewish families who came to Jamaica under Spanish rule before 1655 as conversos, secret Jews, people who had been given a choice between conversion, exile, and death by the Inquisition, and who took a fourth option: leave Europe entirely and go somewhere nobody was looking. They were listed in colonial documents as Portugals. When the English seized the island in 1655, they were permitted to practice openly, and they stayed. At Hunts Bay, on the edge of Kingston, there is a Jewish cemetery with graves from the 1670s, headstones carrying Hebrew and Portuguese together. It is one of the oldest Jewish burial grounds in this hemisphere, and most Jamaicans have never heard of it. Alexandra LINDO became one of the largest merchants in Kingston in the late 1700s. And in 1834, 2 brothers named Joshua and Jacob de Cordova founded a newspaper in Kingston. They called it The Gleaner. It is still publishing. Jamaicans read it this morning. These families were also merchants and planters, and some held enslaved people, which is why Black Jamaican families carry these names today, by the same mechanism as Campbell and Beckford and Price. I'm not going to dress that up, but the fact remains. The oldest continuously used surnames in Jamaica did not arrive on an English ship. They arrived on a Spanish one, carried by people running from a fire. Nearly 2 centuries before Jamaica was Jamaica, and 300 years before it was a country. 64 years ago today, Jamaica became a country. But every name in this video was already here, some by a century, some by 3. The men who brought them came to take a fortune and go home, and almost all of them did. Their names are rare in England now. Beckford is uncommon there. Tharp is nearly gone. Modyford has all but vanished. Here, they're on the register at every school in the parish. That's the reversal, and it's worth saying out loud on the 6th of August. They came for the land and lost it. They left behind the one thing they never meant to give away, and it got carried by the people they counted as property into a country they never imagined would exist. You are the reason those names survived, not them. Put your surname in the comments. Tell me your parish. Tell me how far back you can name people. Happy Independence Day. Your surname has been on this island longer than the flag.